You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast. And welcome to Spookulative Evolution.
Hello, Will.
David.
And hello, everybody, and welcome back to Spook-E. Spookulative Evolution is our Halloween-ish themed series that we do every year. In October, we release a bunch of episodes where we choose monsters from myth and popular media and discuss how those creatures, or something like them, might evolve under the regular rules of real-world biology. It is our own fun little game of monstery speculative evolution. Every year, we have a theme. This year's theme is Monsters of Nintendo. As always, there will be 4 Spook-E episodes releasing every Saturday throughout the month of October, and then a bonus Cute-E episode the first weekend of November, and then we will have a Spook-E live stream on November 8th. Come join us and chit-chat about all sorts of monstery, speculative, evolution-y stuff. That'll be at 3 p.m. Saturday, November 8th. Last episode, we tackled the question of how to evolve piranha plants. This episode 2, we are swapping monsters and swapping franchises. We are moving away from the baddies of the Mushroom Kingdom, this time picking some monsters from Hyrule Kingdom. Our monsters this episode are Octoroks.
Yeah.
As always, we will begin with a deep dive into the lore and variety of the monsters, and then in the second half of the episode, we'll pull as much inspiration as we need to from real-world evolution to figure out where on our tree of life Octorok-like creatures might evolve, and what scenarios might lead to them evolving all of the bizarre features we're about to discuss. This was a fun one to research because I am significantly less familiar with Octoroks than with piranha plants, although now I feel like I know them pretty well.
Yes.
Octoroks are monsters from the Legend of Zelda franchise. They are octopus-like monsters that spit rocks. It's right there in the name. Very straightforward. Octoroks are among the most common enemies throughout the Zelda franchise. They have appeared in almost every Legend of Zelda game that there has ever been, all the way back to the beginning. Octoroks are typically depicted as octopus-like with a large mantle, so that's sort of the head that you would think of an octopus or a squid. The head of an Octorok is often round. They tend to have a pair of eyes that faces forwards, often low down on the mantle, and they tend to have a round mouth that protrudes forward underneath the eyes. That seems to probably be taking inspiration from the siphons of real-world octopuses, because a real-world octopus's mouth is underneath the body.
Which is really common in Japanese media and anime and stuff, that squids and octopus characters have a round suction cup mouth because they're interpreting, at least for the cartoon, that the siphon is their mouth.
Yes, exactly. And then underneath the mantle with the eyes and the mouth are a set of little octopus-like arms. This is also a very typical appearance for just octopus creatures in Nintendo games broadly. There's been a ton of octopus monsters across Nintendo games, and they all tend to be shaped kind of like this.
Yes.
Octoroks vary quite a bit. They come in a variety of different shapes and sizes and colors, and notably, they also vary a bunch in the number of arms that they have. So, beginning with the classic original appearance of Octoroks. Octoroks first appear in the original Legend of Zelda back in 1986. They have round heads, short arms. They appear to have 8 arms underneath their body, a proper octopus number, a protruding mouth. They're also roughly the same size as Link, who is a child, so, they're not particularly huge. These Octoroks crawl around on land, and when Link gets close, they spit rocks at him. These are pretty run-of-the-mill, standard, not particularly special enemies for this game. They're pretty slow, they're pretty weak. You can defeat them with basically any weapon that you come across in the game. These are very minor obstacle bad guys. In the original Legend of Zelda, they come in two varieties, red and blue, which differ only in how strong they are. The blue ones are a little bit stronger. This general structure of Octorok is pretty consistent throughout most of the 2D or top-down Legend of Zelda games. This sort of round head, short arms, walking around on land, being a relatively weak enemy. That's kind of the Octorok you can expect to see in most of the 2D Zelda games. Sometimes the Octoroks can jump. Sometimes they'll shoot rocks in multiple directions. Like they'll spin around and shoot rocks all around them. In at least one game, there are Octoroks that travel in swarms. Some games have golden Octoroks that are faster and stronger, but they tend to be this similar sort of shape. Most of the time in these games, these Octoroks are depicted with 4 arms.
Yes.
Which is half the number of a proper octopus. Sometimes they're depicted with 6 arms, but most often 4. And of note, in The Adventures of Link, which is Zelda 2, the Octoroks appear to have teeth in their round siphon mouth.
Oh,
that's
okay.
as far as I know, that's the only game where that is a feature.
All right, interesting.
Also noteworthy, in the games, the Octoroks tend to look like this sort of cartoony shape we've been describing. In a lot of old comics and like game books, like the guides to the video games, Octoroks are depicted as much more octopus-like.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They're much less cartoony. They've got long, flexible arms. They look like old school pirate drawings of octopuses that'll like attack ships and stuff. They don't ever look like that in the games, but they do look like that in like the concept art.
Interesting. That's really neat to know.
Octoroks tend to be somewhat different in their appearance in the 3D Zelda games. Starting in 1998 with Ocarina of Time, we get a different flavor of Octorok. The Octoroks in this game are aquatic, like real-world octopuses are. They hang out in the water. When Link enters their area, they jump up out of the water and shoot rocks at him. Mm-hmm. And then if Link gets too close to them, they disappear back under the water and hide.
All right. Okay.
These Octoroks tend to be purple. They have glowing green eyes that are higher up on the head. They also aren't as round and bulbous as the classic Octorok. They've got more of like a deflated looking mantle, kind of more like a real world octopus.
Yeah, well, and the shape, and just overall profile, kind of like a mushroom cap.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They also have longer arms. They're not like short, stubby arms like the 2D Octoroks. They're longer and a bit more squid-like, although they do still have 4 arms.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This version of Octorok is a much more formidable enemy because you can't just run up and hit them because they disappear under the ground. They tend to be a little more dangerous, a little more difficult. They require a little extra strategy to defeat. Typically, you defeat them either by shooting them with an arrow or, very classically, by deflecting their rock with your shield.
Right. Bouncing it back
and you'll
at
bounce
them.
the rock, you bounce it right back at them, and it hits them and it takes them out.
Nice.
This style of Octorok would go on to become the standard for a lot of the 3D games. So they show up again in Majora's Mask, they show up in Wind Waker, and they also tend to vary a bit. Sometimes they're a bit more squid-like, with a taller head and long, slender arms. Sometimes in Wind Waker, for example, they are depicted with an extra pair of long, squid-like tentacles.
Yeah, the feeder arms.
Yes. So they have 4 arms and then 2 additional tentacles that they're using for, grabbing or whatever.
Interesting.
And in some games, this is also true in Wind Waker, there are freshwater and ocean Octorok varieties. The ocean Octoroks are often a bit larger, and they'll have a spiky mantle, kind of almost like a conch shell. Shape on the top of the head. All across this variety, they share spitting rocks at Link or whoever is getting too close to them. There are some alterations to their projectiles. Sometimes they shoot fiery projectiles. Sometimes they are explosive. There are some icy projectiles. And in some cases, there are homing projectiles that zero in on the person that they're shooting at.
Rude.
Yeah, it is, honestly. It is a rude strategy. So broadly speaking, we have two sort of varieties of Octorok. We have the round, sort of cartoony terrestrial Octoroks, and then we have the aquatic, slightly less cartoony and slightly grosser looking
Yes.
aquatic Octoroks that hang out in the water.
Interesting.
Another thing that is very common with Octoroks is they're changing to match their habitat.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Octoroks are found in a variety. The classic Octoroks are just either walking around on land or jumping up out of the water. But in later games, you get Octoroks appearing in specific habitats and adjusting their appearance to match that habitat. So, for example, in Skyward Sword, and this is also in Breath of the Wild, you get forest Octoroks or grass Octoroks, which have a tuft of vegetation on top of their head that looks like a little shrub, and they are on land, but they do the thing that the aquatic Octoroks do, where they hide underground so that just that shrub is sticking up above the ground. They appear to just be a bush, and then when you get close, they pop up and they spit a rock at you.
Yep. It's very annoying.
It's very annoying. Whether these are actual plants or some sort of part of their body does seem to be unclear.
Well, because you can like cut it off and then they will go and pop up a new one. Like,
yes,
if you cut the plant when they're underground, it will disappear off of them, but then they will get a new one when they hide again.
There are also rock Octoroks that have a rock on their head that hide underground and appear to just be a boulder. There are, and this is particularly in Breath of the Wild, you'll see snow Octoroks, which are white in color and have like a sparse patch of grass on the top of their head. Like plants that are managing to survive the cold of the snow. And there are water Octoroks that are sort of the classic. They tend to be blue. There are also, in a few games, treasure Octoroks, which are gold and have a treasure chest on top of their head. And they function kind of like a mimic.
Yes.
You go over to the treasure chest to get treasure, and it's an Octorok that pops up and shoots something at you. Interestingly, the treasure Octoroks do drop extra rupees.
Right.
So there does seem to be treasure in those treasure chests. In Echoes of Wisdom, there are also fire Octoroks that are found around Elden Volcano, and there are ice Octoroks that are found in cold places. The ice Octoroks are described as having an icy cold within them, which creates a patch of ice on their head.
Okay.
So they're white, but they've got this ice patch on their head that is said to be generated from within.
All right.
So we've got a whole bunch of variety across Octoroks in different habitats. Interestingly, while we're talking about adaptations to habitats, apparently in Skyward Sword, there is some in-game text that suggests Octoroks are descended from oceanic mollusks.
Okay.
So that they are perhaps descended from actual octopuses or something like them.
I was wondering if there was going to be any lore in the games on any of them, because Legend of Zelda is not like heavy duty into, here's the background to everything, but they do have moments every now and then where it's like, oh yeah, here's the story behind this thing.
Yeah, as far as I know, there's not a bunch with Octoroks, but there is at least that one bit of text. Now, in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they introduced a new mechanic, or at least one that is very prominent, that offers us extra insights into how Octoroks work, and that is loot. So traditionally, like most video games, you beat an enemy and maybe you get a rupee or something. But in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, enemies drop stuff that you can then collect. Octoroks drop crabs, fish, and snails, which I assume is their food.
Yes.
That's like the food that was inside of them, which suggests that they are predatory. They are eating animals in the water. They also drop body parts, Octorok tentacles, eyeballs, and octo balloons.
Yeah.
And the octo balloons can be attached to objects, and then they inflate, and then they will float up into the air.
Yes. Which is very intriguing and raises a lot of questions about their internal anatomy.
It does, and it also is related to another ability that Octoroks occasionally demonstrate, which is the ability to fly. I believe this is true in Breath of the Wild, water Octoroks will float when it's raining. And according to the game, this is that their internal octo balloon is inflated and it allows them to float around. You'll also see in a number of games sky Octoroks, which float around and can be, I believe this is true in the more recent games, you'll find them carrying platforms that are floating around high up in the sky.
Which is really leaning into the balloon shape of their head.
Yes. In A Link to the Past, there are creatures called octoballoons, which are floating, inflated monsters, and when they explode, they release tiny Octoroks called puffers. There is this consistent balloon-like attribute to Octoroks. In Skyward Sword, there are a different form of sky Octoroks that fly using a pair of leaves on their head.
Oh.
Now, I have not played Skyward Sword, and I tried to find a clip of these Octoroks. I assume that they're flying by spinning the leaves like propellers.
That would be my assumption as well.
I suppose it is also possible that they're flapping them, but that just doesn't seem like what Nintendo would have done.
Yeah, no, if I have to put money down, they are little helicopter Octoroks.
And then, while we're on the note of flying Octoroks, in Link's Awakening, there are also winged Octoroks, which are completely normal-looking classic Octoroks with a pair of feathery wings.
So it's just like winged Koopas and winged
Absolutely,
Goombas.
yes. It is the
little
exact
angel
same
wings.
idea as Paragoombas and Paracoopas. It's just a pair of little angel wings that they can use to fly for short distances.
That makes me very happy.
So again, we've got two general varieties of Octorok, and there is some overlap. So I mentioned that the 2D classic Octorok tends to be the rounded head, and then the 3D ones tend to be a little more oblong or less rounded. That also varies. The Octoroks from some of the more recent 3D games, like Breath of the Wild, are more rounded, even though they're doing the jumping up and down out of the water thing. So they've kind of converged on a more typical shape. And within that, there's some variety in terms of their appearance and their habitats and their occasional ability to fly. There are also a handful of exceptional cases among Octoroks. These exceptional cases tend to be very large bosses. In Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, there are big Octos, which are very much the same as the 3D Octoroks you get in those games, but they're enormous. Compared to Link, they're like elephant-sized.
Yeah.
Sometimes these just attack physically, like they'll run into you. They will also try to suck up Link into their mouth and then spit him back out.
Oh, okay.
So they are using their siphon mouth in reverse.
Yeah, because there's one. I think it's the Rock Octoroks in Breath of the Wild or Tears that will inhale stuff to then shoot at you, and you can use the trick of getting them to inhale weapons and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, there are a handful of cases where Octoroks will suck up something. You'll watch them suck something up and then spit it back out.
Yeah, okay.
Which does suggest that they're getting their rocks from the environment.
Yes, it does.
In Phantom Hourglass, there is a boss named Cyclok, who is also an Octorok, also quite large, similar, rhino elephant size. Cyclok rides around on a vortex of wind and creates small tornadoes, which seems to be a unique attribute among Octoroks.
Yes. This one's a airbender.
And then, in Wind Waker, there is a different type of big octo, which are truly big, absolutely enormous. These are ocean Octoroks that are very Kraken-like. They are definitely modeled off of this giant squid, Kraken-like appearance. They are absolutely gigantic. So Will is looking at the pictures that I have provided as reference, and I went into the games, and for the pictures, I put a little picture of Link for scale next to each of these big Octoroks, and for the big Octo, Link is barely noticeable.
Yeah, it's like an office building that he's standing next to. It is massive.
These are huge. They create whirlpools to suck up your ship, because Wind Waker, you're sailing a ship across the ocean. These big Octos create big whirlpools that your ship can get lost in. They also have a bunch of large eyes across their mantle, which are their weak spots. That's how you defeat them, is you shoot them in the eyes. Depending on how difficult the fight is supposed to be, they will have different numbers of eyes. They will have either 4, 8, or 12 eyes, which scales with how difficult the battle is going to be.
Yes.
And then, speaking of exceptional cases of Octoroks, in A Link Between Worlds, there is a character named Octo, who is a friendly talking Octorok who runs the local Octoball Derby. Octo is just a normal Octorok for all appearances, except that he speaks and he plays a baseball-like game where instead of shooting rocks, he shoots balls to then be hit in the Octoball Derby.
I want this to be a case like Team Rocket's Meowth, where it's just like, why can't he talk? I don't know.
Well, so Octo exists in the Dark World, which is a parallel dimension to Hyrule. So one assumes that that's why he is a talking Octorok, is that he is from a different dimension, and that's not what Octoroks do here. There are also in the Dark World Slaroks, which are slug-like Octoroks that appear to be an alternate dimension version of Octoroks.
Interesting. The Octorok multiverse.
There is an Octorok multiverse. For the purposes of our spooky episode, we will probably stick to just the one to keep things easy.
Across the Octoverse.
And then there are a handful of honorable mentions, things that are kind of like Octoroks and might be related and are often named similar things or described as being similar to Octoroks, but are not quite proper Octoroks. There are Octomines, which exist underwater. They are round and dark and spiky. They look like ocean mines.
Mm-hmm.
They have no arms. They propel themselves with their mouth spout. And when you get close, they explode because they are aquatic mines.
Yes.
In Spirit Tracks, there are Octives, which are kind of like Octoroks, but they're tall and they don't really have much in the way of arms. They kind of just look like a big tube.
Mm-hmm.
But they do pop out of the water and shoot rocks.
All right.
So they behave the same way that Octoroks do. In that same game, there's also Ocotoroks, which do the exact same thing, but in the sand. So they pop up out of the sand and shoot rocks at you.
Yeah, these look a lot more like the Sesame Street aliens.
Yes,
yep. Like they're very different profile. Interesting.
And then finally, one last Octorok-like thing to mention is a boss from Tears of the Kingdom named Muctorok. Muctorok has a head that is very much like an Octorok, 4 arms that have webbing between them, kind of like a vampire squid.
Mm-hmm.
Muctorok has a toothy mouth, and he shoots sludge, and also creates sludge monsters that are like sharks that swim around. Muctorok appears to be very different from an Octorok, but when you beat Muctorok, he drops Octorok parts.
Yeah,
the loot that he drops is Octorok pieces, which suggests that either he is made of the same stuff or he has been eating Octoroks.
Yes. Yeah, that is a good point.
And also he walks around, not like all the other Octoroks walk on their 4 arms. He stands up on 2 of them, and the other 2 he waves around like their front limbs, like arms like we have.
Well, and his eyes are also way up on the sides of his head instead of facing forward like most other Octoroks. So
Yes.
he's
So
weird.
he's a monstrous Octorok. He's an unusual Octorok-like creature. Also,
Yeah.
fun fact about Muktorok, I hate this guy.
I was just about to say he is adequately weird and strange and uncomfortable looking for how awful he is.
Absolutely. By far my least favorite, maybe my least favorite boss I've ever fought in a Zelda game.
Yes.
Not a fan of Muktorok. And you know what the
Yes.
problem is with Muktorok? Is that he sucks.
Yeah.
And so when he's beating me, I feel bad.
Yeah, I'm getting beaten by this weird, gooey, wiggly guy that's like, no, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy to get my butt kicked by a dimension-hopping centipede monster the size of a skyscraper.
Yes.
Absolutely. When Muktorok is beating me, that's honestly rude and demoralizing.
It is embarrassing. I don't feel good. I hope no one was watching.
Yes. And unfortunately, Will was watching when I was trying to fight Muktorok.
It is. He just so. Oh, and you get him, and he's ready to be hit, but you can't make it over because there's muck everywhere, and then he just jumps back in. Oh.
No, don't like this guy. He's the worst. So, not unlike our discussion last episode with piranha plants, although perhaps a bit more conservative in the variety, we've got a couple of classic takes on Octorok, really one classic take on Octoroks. Some of them are on land, some of them are in the water, and then there's sort of a variety of different attributes they have, and a few offshoots that seem to lead to exceptional cases of particularly large ones or particularly gross things like Muktorok.
Yes.
And that completes our Octorok lore for the purposes of this episode, which means that it is time to now use what we've learned, both in the last 20 minutes or so and also in the last decade or two of our education as biologists, to figure out how we evolve an Octorok. Before we get into that, as usual, it is important for us to make a little magic disclaimer to point out that our biological toolkit can only account for things that are not magic and supernatural. So there are some features of these creatures that we probably won't be able to evolve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably they're not going to be able to create little tornadoes to carry themselves around on. That's magic. We're going to skip that. But we are going to try to use the toolkit of natural selection and evolution to generate something branching off of the Earth Tree of Life that is very Octorok-esque. So, Will, how do we evolve an Octorok?
The first, obviously they are based off of octopus. So we have an animal that they are inspired by. But as is often the case with creatures like that, a bunch of what they do are very much not octopus traits.
Yeah, outside of their physical appearance, they are not very octopus-like.
Yeah.
Which would fit with a creature that is not an octopus, but is convergent in appearance for some reason.
Which is where my brain was kind of going. And so I was running through animals that, could be very octopus-shaped. Spiders could be very octopus-shaped.
Sure.
For a lot of the terrestrial ones, and the first one that gave me the thought was actually one of the spiky bodied ones, hermit crabs also.
Oh
Yeah, which could give us our variety with different shells and stuff. That would also give you both aquatic and terrestrial members.
Absolutely. There's also, because I had the same thought of what is there and what can give you, and I had the same thought with the spikiness, that we could, if we were feeling particularly lazy, say that these Octoroks are just the exact same thing as the piranha plants that we made last episode.
Yep. I mean, snail shell kind of things could give us a lot of these. Snails also have a tubular mouth for a lot of them. They have this very shaped mouth.
And our piranha plants spit projectiles that we've already worked into that. So there is a world there is a parallel dimension, the dark world, where our Octoroks and our piranha plants are just the same thing. But let's not.
Yes, let's add some variety to the season.
I do like the crustacean angle
Yes.
because it gives you the arms, it gives you the capability of being on land and in the surface. It also gives you a proper mouth
Yeah.
and recognizable eyes.
Yes. The the mouth on these is very tubular, which is not a typical crustacean mouth, and I don't know enough about crustacean diversity to know if there are some that have formed more fleshy structures around the mouth. So I
Yes.
don't know how weird or difficult that would be for a crustacean to evolve.
That being said, as we mentioned, in octopuses, this structure would not be a mouth.
Exactly.
And you absolutely have a variety of animals that have orifices that are not the mouth, but function to take in or release whatever it is that they're trying to take in or release. With octopuses, they're using their siphon for propulsion, for moving themselves through the water, which I don't think crustaceans typically do. But if they're in the water, it's certainly a potential function. Octopuses also use the siphon for releasing ink as a defense mechanism.
Absolutely.
I do see. One of the things that's kind of nice about a crustacean angle is that they have legs.
Yes,
and it's a
that's
little
the other
bit.
reason.
Octopus arms are not really made for moving around on land.
Yeah. And like at a glance, if you just saw the shape of a hermit crab leg, a crustacean limb, they are very often long appendages that taper to a point, which is the same description for an octopus arm, just one is jointed and hard instead of being jointless and soft. So,
Yes.
like, especially if these are short and close to the body, which most of the Octoroks have very short limbs, I could see it looking very much like you're just seeing the pointy tips of these legs, and they look very just tip of a octopus arm.
Yeah, the other thing I like about the crustacean limb idea is that crustacean limbs are highly variable in their shape and function.
Yes.
So the idea of having a handful of walking limbs and then two larger limbs like squid tentacles for grasping or interacting, crabs have that, right?
Yes.
They have walking legs and then they have their claws that are specially adapted for grasping at stuff. Scorpions are very similar. The other thing I was going to note is that it is very common among arthropods to repurpose some of the walking legs to function as either grabbers or mouth parts or whatnot, so you could have a diversity that includes multiple sets of functional legs. You could have some that have 4 functional legs and some that have maybe 6 functional legs because they're repurposing them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's tons, like hermit crabs, for instance, only have 4 walking legs, and then they have their 2 claws. They have a back pair of legs that help hold on to the shell and help maneuver the shell along with their abdomen to keep it in place. So yeah, repurposing. The long feeder arms also make me think of shrimps. Many of them have cleaning arms that are like a bendy lamp, a long sectioned flexible arm with a little claw on the end that they use to brush over and get into all the nooks and crannies on their body to clean themselves. And it's effectively a crustacean tentacle. Like it is a hose like, not hollow, but a flexible appendage made out of many jointed parts. So crustaceans can make flexy body parts. It's just not the most common thing we see, but shrimp do have those.
Yeah. The other thing I like about your hermit crab comparison is that among the variety of Octoroks are ones that carry different things for camouflage on their back.
Yes, exactly.
So if our standard Octorok is just carrying a shell around, And maybe there's even something with they're coating the shell with something to make it a little smoother, or it appears to just be part of the body. But you can easily adjust that, especially if they've got long arms to use to maintain their body and their shell. They could put vegetation on top of it, or put a rock on top to help them blend in, which we see in, for example, decorator crabs. And some insects do that as well. They are attaching parts of the environment to their body.
Exactly. So like modifying the shell both in decoration and in to be a structure for them to live within is something hermit crabs actually do. You know, they will scrape out and modify the interior of the shell to make it more roomy. And if it's a shell from something similar to a like moon snail, they have incredibly spherical shells, like very round, very, you know, almost like from the top point of view, almost a perfect circle. They're not spherical all the way around. They're more flattened and compressed, but from the front, it looks very round. So there are definitely shells that could give them this ovoid top part.
Yeah. Well, they're grabbing shells from the piranha plants.
Yes.
And they're using those as their... Now, there are a couple other things that I like the direction so far. We're getting sort of the shape and appearance of the Octoroks. We've got them in multiple habitats, because crustaceans are fantastic at adapting to multiple different habitats. Hermit crabs themselves live in a variety of places. There's also the question of size. Octoroks tend to be larger than most crustaceans we have today. There's the question of projectiles, which is the big rock in the room. There's also the question of them jumping.
Yeah.
Because Octoroks typically are launching themselves up either out of the water or popping up out of the ground. So having some sort of mechanism for doing that, I think if they have something that they're able to use like a siphon for propulsion, that can pretty easily get them shooting up just above the surface of the water if needed.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that definitely is an avenue there. The size category feels like we're pretty good because hermit crabs include the largest terrestrial arthropod, which is the coconut crab. That's just a big hermit crab. Coconut crabs, when they're young, carry shells, and then they just outgrow the ability to have a shell large enough for them to be in, so they just tuck their leathery abdomen. But like coconut crabs, the robber crabs, start out as young as just a normal hermit crab. Like they live just like any other hermit crab. They just get bigger than anyone else, and there aren't snails big enough for them to continue being hermit crabs at that size.
Amazing. So we could easily have them get quite large.
Yes.
And of course, we can, as we often do with Spook-E, we can push the bounds a little bit. If you're able to get enough nutrition, or you're able to take in whatever supplements they need from the environment, they can maybe push to the size of a heroic young boy.
Yes. Well, it's the way I always think of it with Spook-E is if we make a slightly small Octorok, like it's slightly smaller than the video game canon, but it's a little bit bigger than the animal would actually be. It's a nice middle ground. We've stretched the bounds of how big those animals probably would usually get, but it's not a full-sized Octorok, so it also feels a little more reasonable. So it's a nice balance.
Yeah. I also wonder if our Octoroks could then, either they're using shells from monstrously large shelled animals that we haven't created yet, or our piranha plants, which have large rounded shells, which honestly is a great option.
Yeah, I do not dislike that. That is very satisfying.
But they could also maybe just be using rocks or bits of plant material or other things that allow them to build up this home that they're carrying around on their back.
Yeah, they could be something more like caddisflies, where the larvae build those tubes out of adhered bits of stick in rock. and create a hermit crab like structure on their back end, but it has been built out of pieces from their environment. So they could be doing something similar to that.
So kind of maybe more like a decorator crab, where they're collecting things, but then are actually using those things to build that space that they need to carry around with them.
And you could get both, where when there's shells big enough, they use shells when they're young.
Yes.
And then as they size out, they have to start using different things. And since there are a size variety of Octoroks, you could be like, yeah, the big ones are the same species as the little ones. We just call these big octos because they're huge. That it's the same thing. It's, like glass eels are just baby eels. That's not a type of eel. So you could get a shift in behavior.
I do also like the idea that, the Octoroks that live in the jungles where those piranha plant creatures live, they can get big and have a big shell.
Yes.
The Octoroks, I'm trying to remember if our Kraken had an internal shell structure. It might have.
Oh, yeah.
So there could be some in the ocean that are using those. You could also have them using bones.
Yes,
that
absolutely.
What they're carrying is like the pelvis of some animal that they picked up and collected, and maybe they're either adding things or mineralizing themselves a bit, like a lot of ocean animals do, to reinforce it. So they're using these various pieces in their environment to create these homes, and the ones that get good big ones are the ones that are able to then grow into those and become extra large.
Yes. Yeah. No, I like that.
All right. Now, for projectiles, I have a wacky idea.
Go for it, because I have none right now.
I have a wacky idea. We were talking about them repurposing their arms.
Mm-hmm.
And so a crustacean has, 10 limbs, I think, is the
like
standard?
That's the base number, because is decapods, they have 10 to work with, but then you definitely get, like, with lobsters and shrimps, the swimmerets on their back part, which are limb-like, but they have, like, 30 of them in just crazy numbers, depending on the one you look at.
And it is not unheard of. In fact, it is quite common for limbs or limb-like appendages to end up as part of the mouth parts, right? Spiders and scorpions have a situation like that. Crabs, which are grabbing things to then bring them to the mouth. So as part of the feeding apparatus.
Yeah, and when you look at their mouth parts, like the parts they use to actually feed, they are basically just the same kind of structure as a limb. Like they're jointed, maneuverable pieces that process the food before shoving it down into their mouth.
Yes. Okay. Mantis shrimp.
Oh.
Mantis shrimp use their front limbs to make extremely rapid movements that they're using to punch things.
Yes.
The mantis shrimp are punching each other. They'll also like punch clams open. They are extremely powerful. I'm picturing a siphon-like mouth part that is built out of sort of different limb elements, but there is an internal mechanism that punches.
Yeah.
Either physically moving something or changing the air pressure and launching something that's in there out into the outside world.
Yeah.
This could even be, because we talked about some Octoroks suck things in, if you have that mouth part pull back very quickly, you could create suction like fish that use suction feeding. And it can suck up prey, snails, fish, and the other thing that I said they drop as loot, into the mouth that they could then devour.
Yeah, I do really like that.
It's a bit wacky.
It is, but it doesn't feel unreasonable. If it's able to act as both piston and plunger to both suck things in and pop things out, then it works as a feeding mechanism, like you were just saying, for gulp feeding. It also would make sense because like mantis shrimp have burrows and are this way. Another shrimp that comes to mind that also could be a mechanism, but I think I like yours better, is pistol shrimp, which have
I was thinking about that.
claw that can launch pressurized bubbles. But both of those they make burrows, and then they are very territorial of their burrow. And if another neighbor comes around, they'll like kick sand at them and, try to get them off. Having ability to shoot sediment at someone who's getting a little too close to your burrow is a good tool to have. And this is one of the reasons I first thought of hermit crabs, because the terrestrial Octoroks, the ones on land, still burrow into the ground.
Yes, they do.
And hermit crabs are good diggers. But if they were already burrowing animals, making homes, and this is part of the way that they defend their home, is when a fish comes looking around to be like, ooh, could I live in this? They're like, no, rock, go away.
Yes. Well, and I also like the idea. So if we're thinking about this from the evolutionary stages, that this is ancestrally, it's either defensive or it's suction feeding.
Yes. Oh, and it could have, one of the first reasons they had to shoot stuff back out is if they suction feed, they then need to get rid of the indigestible parts.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, you suck in a crab, you digest it, and then you have to spit out the hard parts. Or you suck in a fish, but a rock comes in with it.
Yes.
Because you accidentally sucked up a rock. You have a mechanism inside to separate out the digestible parts and then spit back out the stuff you don't want. And that can then develop into a defensive mechanism.
Yeah.
That mechanism becomes a little more powerful. And if they're also using it for propulsion, that this is a function that they can suck in slowly and then rapidly close that pressure. They can push themselves along. That one mechanism is now being reinforced by multiple different functions. So over time, the more effective and refined that piston system becomes, the more effective you are at catching food, defending yourself, and propelling yourself through the water if you need to get away from something. They could also be using it for burrowing.
Yes.
Right? If they can, like a pistol shrimp, spit a bunch of water out, that clears some sediment.
Yeah. And it makes sense for propulsion because it's that little burst would be a good way to just pop you backwards, very much like lobsters and shrimps do by curling their tail suddenly and shooting backwards to get away from a predator.
And also, there are like scallops that do that.
Yes.
And octopuses clearly are animals that do that. So I do like that. It's weird, but it's exactly the kind of weird that I would totally believe it if a documentary was like, hey, we just discovered this lobster that shoots rocks by punching them.
Yep.
Yeah, I would 100% believe that.
Oh,
we have mantis shrimp, we have pistol shrimp.
Crustaceans absolutely make sense. Well, and the other thing that makes this fun is it means that our Octoroks are not aggressors, but just territorial. So when Link's getting too close, they're shooting rocks at you, not because they're trying to get you. They just want you to go away.
Yeah, my babies are here. I have a burrow. Go away. Which does line up with the Octoroks that hide, which don't pursue. They tend not to actually pursue Link. They tend to stay in one place. And if you get far enough away, they go back down underground.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, all right, you're gone. Fine. And then you can pop back down underground.
Yeah, it's just like getting too close to a wasp nest. They're not out to get you. You're just in the wrong place. I do like this a lot. Oh, so one of the things you get from them is Octorok tentacles, which are displayed in the image very much as a tentacle.
Yes, very octopus-like.
And so does make it, flexible and all that stuff. But crustaceans have to shed their skin, and soft shell crab is very floppy.
That's true.
So you could absolutely have floppy-armed Octoroks if they've recently shed.
Yes. I was going to say that they drop fish, crabs, snails, and Octorok tentacles. That maybe they're just eating octopuses.
Yes, that was the other thought
they're
I
just
had.
preying on octopuses, and so you'll cut them open, and sometimes an octopus comes out.
Yep.
So it sounds like we've got crab-like crustaceans that are ancestrally aquatic, much like our piranha plants were, developed the habit similar to hermit crabs of collecting shells and other pieces to make a little back/home for themselves, something that is defensive that they can maybe pull back into.
And this really means they could come from just about any group from the crab-like side, because hermit crabs do that. Sponge crabs modify a sponge to be on their back. So like there's also ones that wear an anemone on their back. Like wearing something on their body is a very common thing that this general group of crustaceans does.
Yes. And of course, if they're crabs, they can be literally any lineage of arthropod life that has converged on crab, as we know they like to do. So they collect stuff from their environment. They wear pieces on their back. They also hide in burrows or small areas that they defend. And they have developed this mouthpart structure that they have a mantis shrimp-like piston system for sucking in prey, spitting out unwanted stuff that can also then be co-opted for propulsion. And like a ton of crustaceans have done, some of them have adapted to moving up onto land, probably starting out in shallow environments, but then moving into like forests and stuff like that, using those mouth parts, right, modifying them slightly to now they're not used for propulsion or suction feeding anymore, because you can't do either of those things in the air. So now they can be exclusively used for picking up objects and spitting them back out as a defensive measure.
Yes, I really like it. And I like this mechanism for the rocks, because now I'm picturing that whenever an Octorok would shoot at you, you would hear this trigger mechanism
as they suck up a rock and then get ready for it.
And when they launch it, there would be a pop as they release the mechanism and it hits the rock. There would be this loud, hammer mechanism like on a revolver as it hits the rock and launches it at you.
Yes. Or if they are just doing it as a pressure, if they're not actually punching it, but they're pushing forward and it's increasing the pressure inside, there would be a thump, as it popped out like a cork.
Yeah. Yes.
That's pretty cool.
I like this.
Well, great. So our Octoroks are crabs. Crabs that have modified their limbs in a variety of ways. They've got modified mouth parts, and they carry around shells or bones or whatnot on their back, both to defend themselves and to camouflage themselves.
Yes.
Actually, I also like the idea that if they're on land and they're feeding, they could also be popping up and then sucking up like bugs and stuff.
Yeah. It also is nice because it's a crustacean, so they can be all sorts of colors. They diversify really well. So like all the different varieties of Octorok feel very fitting to where it's like, well, yeah, if they live here, they're building their structure out of different stuff. So it's going to look different. It's going to have plants in it. It's going to have rocks in it. It's going to have stuff that fits to this environment. So of course it looks different.
And if the siphon thing is mouth parts, it could occasionally have teeth.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is acceptable.
Yeah. Cool.
Wonderful. Well, I'm quite happy with our crab to rock.
Yeah. You shouldn't ever, for anyone listening, you shouldn't ever buy pet Octoroks from places because they don't breed well in human care. Basically, all the ones you see at like the mall and stuff have to be wild caught. So this is a joke, but also, it is true about hermit crabs. Don't buy hermit crabs.
You buy them small, and then they just keep getting bigger, and then eventually you don't have room for them anymore, and so you put them out on the beach.
Well, they're using your laundry basket as their thing.
Right.
They just start using different stuff from around your house.
And the garbage bin, and then eventually you're going to run out of stuff.
So it's just they don't make good pets. They're cute when they're small.
I'm picturing an Octorok that has been lucky enough to dwell around a shipwreck.
Yes.
And just keeps finding things that are bigger and bigger, and then you can get your enormous, almost Kraken-like Octorok that is carrying like part of the hull of a ship on its back. That is pretty cool.
Yep. I like it.
Listeners, as always, thank you for listening to our speculative, spooky ramblings and ravings and thinkings. If you have further ideas about how you might add or adjust or change our evolved Octorok, let us know. You can send us a message, or even better, you can join our Discord. The Spook-E channel will be full of people chit-chatting about our ideas and your ideas. Also, as always, if you happen to be an artist and you happen to be inspired to do some art based on what we've come up with, please share it with us. We love to see the fan art that our spooky creatures end up with, and we love to share them with our own audience who appreciates them greatly.
Yes, it's arguably the best part of Spook-E.
This has been the second episode of this year's Spook-E with Nintendo Monsters. We did Mario baddies. We did Zelda baddies. There's more to come. 2 more episodes in the month of October, releasing the next 2 Saturdays. And then a final Cute-E episode at the beginning of November. And then the Spooky live stream on Saturday, November 8th at 7 p.m. on YouTube. You can join us there and talk about speculative evolution and stuff. I can't wait. We had a great lineup of creatures this year. I'm real excited.
Absolutely. And as always, taking all bets in the Discord for you to guess what it's going to be, and you'll have to just wait to find out.
Indeed. Well, you all have to wait another week for the next episode to come out, but Will and I are going to record the next episode right now, so I'm very excited about it.
Yep.
So let's get out of here.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.